Hey guys, welcome to Cinematographs. Last week I watched the new movie The Beekeeper, which is basically a Jason Statham version of John Wick. And I don't know if I was just living under a rock or something, but I'd not seen any advertisements or trailers for it before, so all I knew going into the movie was the plot synopsis. And I probably should have guessed what type of thing would be based on the fact that it starred Jason Statham, but I honestly wasn't thinking too much about it before I walked into the theaters. So for the first maybe 20-ish minutes, I was very confused on what I was watching, because the film feels very much like a video game. I can't really describe it, but just the way the shots are framed and the camera moves, I get the sense that I'm navigating through one. It's not just visual either, because I think the dialogue, or just the dialogue scenes as a whole, felt a little bit off. And I don't know if that's just a trend among Hitman type movies, because I also felt the same way about The Killer. I'm not calling it a bad thing, at least for me, but it definitely is a thing. Even still, not knowing the kind of thing I was going into, it wasn't hard to kind of understand what the style of it was, and my opinions did shift midway because of that. I found out afterwards that the director is the same guy who made Suicide Squad, and yeah, that completely checks out. The Beekeeper is very much not meant to be taken seriously. It's extremely over the top, with little grasp on reality, even by action genre standards. And there's two main things that drive that style in the film. First is the editing. There are so many quick cuts in this film, and I get that part of that is from it being action, but you can just really feel that non-stop pacing from the very beginning. In other action movies I've seen, the editing is more natural, I think, or invisible. Some of the cuts are also just really random or unnecessary, particularly during dialogue scenes. It's like the editing equivalent of trigger happy. But honestly, that all does contribute to the craziness of the film, and I've definitely seen worse editing somewhere else before. The second thing to note here is the awful music. It is so overused and shows up at times that do not require it at all, which ends up ruining the emotion of the scene or making that emotion kind of confusing. I remember there being one part towards the end where it was cross-cutting between different people and the music just like slammed on a shot of the mom standing there for no reason. The editors had to have had their eyes closed and added music at random points of the movie because it was just so out of place. And just the choice of music itself, it's like trailer music because it's dramatic and loud and clearly building up to something. And that's like the type of music used at almost every point of the film. For me, this kind of ridiculousness in the production was what I was more laughing at than any dialogue. There were a few lines here and there, but the rest of the film's comedy kind of fell flat. I also didn't like the character of Verona's acting. She didn't have much to work with in the first place because each character has zero development, but I think the reason why her acting stood out in particular was because it was neither serious nor dramatic. So it was kind of hovering in this awkward limbo in the film. And I wouldn't say anyone's performance was like great because it's all meant to be exaggerated. And the action itself was good, though Jason Statham's character is basically an unstoppable force in the film. And because of that, the fight scenes feel less like fight scenes and more just like you're watching his character torture a bunch of people for the entirety of the film. So that part tends to get a little stale. I think the best fight was where the other character was actually a challenge for him, and it might have lasted the longest as well, so it didn't feel anticlimactic when it was over. But in general, the action sequences were pretty nice and made good use of the characters' environments. Statham's one-liners during these fights were okay. They were a little cheesy, but that's to be expected. I feel like every time someone mentioned the phrase "the beekeeper," they expected the audience to cheer or something. And the lighting is good, albeit maybe super flashy, but that kind of fits with the film's tone as a whole. There's going to be unnecessary camera movements, cuts, and music. But at the same time, that extravagance kind of makes it simple in that you can pin down what you're going to see. My overall ranking is a 5.5 out of 10. I'm not gonna lie and say that's an objectively great film because it's not, and I think there's better films to watch that will give you the same experience. But I'm also not gonna be the type of person to say, this is the piece of trash that is killing the movies. It's bad, but that's the point, and I don't hate that. It's not necessarily a problem here because at the end of the day, you know what you're getting from it and it doesn't try to be more than it is. It's one of those guilty pleasure films where it's not meant to be celebrated but rather enjoyed, like Hallmark movies. There's nothing deeper about it, it's very unrealistic, but it's a little bit fun, and that's the general consensus from the public. And yeah, you can't argue that there still is a deeper meaning with the themes of wealth and exploitation, but like the way the film presents it doesn't make you think very much about it because that's just not what it's meant to do. Basically, don't expect much from The Beekeeper, like if you're hoping there will be some surprise factor or scene that just hits you, like how maybe people felt with Barbie. It is what it is, which is entertainment. They're not reinventing the wheel here.